All right, let's talk about economic policy, but we're going to do it a little differently. I want you to forget just for a moment about isolated decisions on taxes or interest rates. Instead, let's look at the economy as one single interconnected system. Where one small change over here can create huge ripples everywhere else. Ready? Let's dive in.
So, have you ever looked at the news and just felt like economic policies are completely contradicting each other? It's like one policy is trying to speed things up and another one is slamming on the brakes. It can feel really chaotic, right? Well, it's not random. It's actually a symptom of a much deeper problem in how we even think about the economy.
And this slide, this right here, gets to the heart of it. See, when we analyze economic problems in little silos, we tackle debt over here and inflation way over there, we're always going to end up with siloed solutions. The policies just don't talk to each other. And worse, sometimes they end up actively fighting each other.
So what's the alternative? How do we fix this? Well, we have to completely shift our perspective. We've got to stop seeing the economy as some kind of machine with separate levers to pull. We need to start seeing it for what it really is, a complex, living, breathing ecosystem.
Okay, let's quickly look at the traditional pieces of the puzzle. First up, you've got fiscal policy. This is all about the government's power to spend money, on things like infrastructure, schools, healthcare, and its power to tax. These are huge decisions that directly control how much cash is flowing through the economy.
Then, of course, there's monetary policy. This is usually handled by a country's central bank. By tweaking interest rates, they're basically turning a giant dial that controls how expensive it is to borrow money. That can either cool down a hot economy or heat up a sluggish one.
And let's be real, no economy lives in a bubble, right? Trade policy is what connects everything we do at home to this massive global network of markets, supply chains, and money. Now, the big mistake is thinking we can manage any one of these things on its own.
And here it is. This is the new perspective. This is the economic ecosystem in its entirety. Just look at how fiscal, monetary, and trade policies aren't separate pillars anymore. They're all interconnected parts of a much bigger whole. And notice those foundational pieces that are so often ignored? Strong governance and ethical leadership? Without those, the entire system just falls apart. This right here, this is where strategic thinking really begins.
Because everything is connected, it means there are no simple, easy actions. Every single policy choice, no matter how small, creates trade-offs. It almost always comes with unintended consequences that can ripple through the entire system. You can't just pull one lever anymore. You have to think about how the whole machine is going to react.
Let me give you a classic example. Let's say a government decides to cut taxes to give the economy a short-term boost. Awesome, right? Growth starts to pick up, but there's a trade-off. That action can add to the national debt, which can become this huge weight on the economy years down the road. It's a classic case of a short-term gain for a potential long-term pain.
Okay, so if the economy is this super complex web of trade-offs, how on earth are policymakers supposed to navigate it? Well, that's exactly where strategy comes in. It turns out there are rules, a kind of framework for thinking through these complex interactions to make smarter, more sustainable decisions.
And these are the 5 core rules of that strategic framework. You've got policy integration, strategic coherence, multi-level governance, evidence-based strategy, and ethical leadership. Think of these as the playbook for managing a healthy and resilient economic ecosystem. Let's break each one down.
First up, policy integration. Now, this is way more than just trying to avoid contradictions. It's about deliberately designing all your policies, fiscal, monetary, trade, so that they actually reinforce each other. It's like getting all the rowers in a boat to pull in the exact same direction. When that happens, you create this incredible synergy that makes the whole system so much stronger.
Number 2 is strategic coherence. This one's all about making sure your short-term actions are actually aligned with your long-term vision. Is the tax policy you're creating today going to support your climate goals for 2050? That kind of consistency builds a ton of credibility and gives businesses the certainty they need to invest for the future.
Third, we have multi-level governance. This rule basically acknowledges that no country is an island. National policies are always interacting with global institutions, international rules, and massive market forces. So the bottom line is, understanding what's happening on the global stage is absolutely critical for making smart choices at home.
The fourth rule is so fundamental: evidence-based strategy. It really just means letting data, not just ideology or gut feelings, guide your decisions. When policies are designed and tested using real-world evidence and good modeling, you dramatically reduce the risk of those nasty, unintended consequences we talked about.
And finally,
we get to what might be the most critical rule of all: ethical leadership. Look, none of the other rules really matter without fairness, accountability, and a genuine sense of long-term responsibility. Public trust is literally the currency of effective government, and you only build that trust through integrity.
Now, I want to be clear. This shift to systems thinking isn't just some interesting academic exercise. It's become an urgent necessity. And that's because today, the entire global economic ecosystem is facing some really unprecedented levels of stress. And this slide really lays out the scale of the challenge we're facing. We're dealing with dizzying complexity, geopolitical fragmentation, the hard physical limits of climate change, and, frankly, eroding public trust in our institutions. In an environment like this one, a fragmented, siloed approach to policy isn't just ineffective, it's downright dangerous. So what's the big takeaway from all this? What's the bottom line? It's that you now have a new toolkit. You've got a framework for looking at economic policy not just as a passing headline, but the way a real strategist would.
This right here, this captures the entire mental shift we've been exploring. It's about moving from seeing all those separate puzzle pieces to finally seeing the dynamic, interconnected machine. And honestly, this systems perspective is the only way we're going to build policies that are resilient enough for the challenges we face today and tomorrow.
Which leaves us with one final question for you to think about. I want you to take this framework we've discussed and apply it to your own country's economic strategy. Do the different policies actually work together, or do they seem to be pulling in opposite directions? Is there a clear, cohesive vision? Just starting to ask these questions, well, that's the first step to thinking like a true economic strategist.